to you, and I think we had like talked a little bit about sitting down just to like chat a little bit. But where are you? Are you from Baltimore? I don't
No.
even.
From DC.
DC. Okay.
Maryland area.
Yeah. And did you, like, were you always in that area, or like, did you come into Baltimore, or like, how did you, end up?
Always born
in
and
that?
raised in DC, Maryland area.
Yeah. Is that like PG or
PG County, yeah.
PG County? That's cool. What was the schools like in PG? Cause that's like one of those like fairly like wealthy black communities, right? Like is PG.
I think it's probably second to Montgomery County, but
Montgomery. Maybe that's what I'm thinking
but
about.
PG County is very well off. So the school system is, back then when I was coming up going to school, it was something to be said about PG County schools.
Yeah.
Maybe the curriculums was something to be looked at, but as far as the environment, what they had to offer, it was cool.
Yeah.
PG County. I only could contrast that with being in DC schools, and back then DC schools was well off. It was something to be said about all the programs that was available for DC as well as in Maryland, especially in and around PG County, because they border each other.
Yeah.
And so it was all right to be in school back then.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess like, what was it the school that you went to? Was it, would you say it was predominantly black or?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So you were in what, like, so you graduated high school, or
I went to the 12th grade.
12th grade, yeah.
Ended up having to go get my GED.
And I guess like when you so high school, at what point did you end up getting charged, or like was that high school?
High school. It was my 12th grade year.
Yeah. Okay.
So I ended up catching the charge in my 12th grade year, ended up going to prison.
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting my GED while I was in the county detention center.
And I guess like, well, I don't know, like I know I kept on saying like what comfort, but what were you charged for in the high school senior year? You got like what happened, or
I mean, it was just a situation where two young men, myself and my co-defendant, got ourselves in a situation and got charged, and somebody lost their life in that transaction, and we paid the price for it.
Yeah.
Ended up going to prison for a long time for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. And that's a difficult concept just to think about. So you like 12th grade, what, like 18, 17?
18.
That's like, how do you, and that was like the one thing that pretty much would cause you to have to do the 30 that you did, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, how does that, I don't know, like, what do you feel like we should charge like teens, like, like young people with that? Like, I don't know if, like, as far as understanding, like, like your mental growth, or like your where you are at maturity wise, like charging somebody with that amount of time at such a young age, like I don't even feel like that's appropriate almost.
Well, the charge is what the charge is.
Yeah.
You do certain things. They already have statutes and laws governing those things. So it's not written into the laws for someone who was actually a young adult to be separated from what a full-grown adult would be charged with. Now, there's something to say about a juvenile. Those things can be and have been, recently put to the test, and some of those things have been changed. But for someone who was a young adult, 18, once you cross that line of 18, then you can be 65, 35, or 25.
Yeah.
Then the statutes carry the time that say you're supposed to get. And so I just happen to be in that bracket where if you commit this charge, then you're gonna get this amount of time.
Yeah.
And so it just happened to be enough time for me to do a long time.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so now there's something to be said about whether you could cognitively have been responsible for certain things, but I knew right from wrong.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Okay.
and everybody I knew in and around that time, we knew right from wrong, and we did things based on our understanding of who we are and who we were at that time.
Mm. Yeah.
Of course, if I had it to do over again, I would do it over
Mm.
in a different way.
Right.
But I had that opportunity then.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just that, you know, you may not understand fully the consequences,
Mm.
and that's come from not being exposed a lot to the consequences, because
Yeah.
people protect you from that. You know, you feel
Mhm.
like, you know, as parents in that era time, especially even nowadays, you know, you want to protect your children from the consequences of bad behavior, because you don't even want them to display those bad behaviors that
Right.
could lead to those consequences.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you do those things that would try to steer them away from that. But once you get to a certain age, you start making decisions, you start hanging out with you and your friends, and
Mhm.
you know, whether you understand the consequences or not, the law is what the law is.
Yeah.
And so, like I say, it's something to be said about for juveniles, you know, and there's even something to be said for anybody who's under the age of 25, as
Mhm.
the law is being written and understood as, you know, around during this early time now. But
Yeah.
back then, 18.
Yeah. And so you had mentioned like your friends and your peers. So in PG, would you say that like it was? I guess that like for me, I guess like I'm already coming with a bias because I'm thinking, you know, as far as like I'm thinking about like the city, like the trouble that's in the city. But like when you go into the county, it seems like it's like, you know, a little bit better as far as like you know, peer like the friend groups and like getting into trouble. Like it's not, you know, I guess you would be like less you know, get like it's less likely to get into, you know, certain trouble, like because your group of friends might have like a different, you know, interest, or like a different like I guess like what's it called, like a different like leadership, maybe. I don't know if that's the best word to use, but
What I would say is that
yeah.
when I was coming up,
Mhm.
it was a difference, but not that much of a difference.
Mhm.
I mean, you are who you are. The
Yeah.
things you would do to make yourself available to those lanes where trouble was at,
Right.
man, you did them.
And
you
that
know, and again, it's just like in this early time. I tell a lot of people nowadays, it's a lot of lanes out here for trouble. But
Mhm.
what I come to find out, you have to go looking for those lanes.
and that's one thing that I've also paid attention to as well, is like sometimes we look for it, like rather than like it's almost like an
Or are
attraction
naive
to it
to it.
almost.
And maybe
Yeah.
not just looking for it, you be naive to
Mhm.
dig of that lane.
Yeah.
And you go down that lane not knowing what it could lead to.
Mhm.
So you may be just naive to that fact, not knowing the consequences of your actions, the timing of your actions.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's what a lot of my peer group we dealt with. I mean,
Mhm.
because we did a lot of dumb stuff that we could be characterized as just dumb.
Yeah.
But when you look at the consequences and how they could have evolved into, you know, somebody losing their life or somebody going to prison,
Mhm.
those were just naive mindsets,
Mhm.
you know. And a lot of us didn't fully understand what those things could have led to, those lanes could have led to.
Yeah.
And so we had to pay the consequences for that.
Yeah.
And there were some men who understood it fully
Yeah.
and didn't go down those roads, or, you know, got in them and got out,
Yeah.
you know. So
Right.
it's definitely a delicate balance, you know. And if a lot of people understood it from that perspective,
Mhm.
then it'd probably be a lot better, for lack of better terms, curriculums
Mhm.
around teaching young men and young women how to deal and how to carry themselves when they out in the streets, when they
Right.
out and about with their friends, what to look for, what not to look for, etc.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is like too much, but like would I guess like how would we do something like that, as far as like, you know, letting people know what are the consequences of certain stuff?
Well,
Like,
just like you would let anybody know the consequences of their good behavior. You
Yeah.
expose them to it.
right.
See, behavior rewarded is behavior repeated.
Mhm.
And so on the opposite end of that, what a lot of society has been building their societal norms about in and around is crime and punishment.
Mhm.
And so it's something to be said to be exposed to the consequences of that.
Mhm.
Understanding, You know, if you go down these lanes, what are the true consequences of?
Yeah.
I mean, because I know some men who got 30, 40 years in prison and still there to this day
Yeah.
and crying they pillow every night about one mistake they made.
Yeah.
One mistake. Not being exposed to the full consequences of their actions.
Man.
And so if you was able to construct programs like when I was in an institution, we had programs like Reason Straight, conflict resolution, a Scared Straight was one of the earlier programs where a lot of the youth that would come in, they would get exposed to some of the elements, not all of them, but some of the elements of the consequences of incarceration.
Yeah.
And so what we would try to do is give them reason not to, not just tell them don't do it, but give them reason, sound judgment as to why not to go down this road. And it will hope to broach that naivete that they may have in being around their peers, making decisions. Because a lot of guys who I know who have been incarcerated, they wasn't always the ones who were just easily influenced. They was the leaders.
Yeah.
They put themselves in situations like that. They decided to do certain things. So that easily influenced, watch your friends. I don't know no whole bunch of guys in prison that just was in there because they followed Tom, Dick, and Harry down the wrong path. They was in the wrong path.
Yeah.
And they, they would, if they honest, they'd tell you, yeah, man, I tended to do what I did. I just know the consequences of it fully.
Yeah.
And if I could change it, I would. But a lot of that exposure that could happen is not taking place. And it's mainly built around the idea that you don't want to expose children to the wrong side of life. And some people just had a propensity to go in that direction.
Yeah.
They want that excitement, that limelight, that cachet that comes with being out in that street. It's so glamorized and made a part of the fame that you can get in a young life. So, you know, you got to pick your poison. You know what I'm saying? You want to go down that road, here are the consequences. No men that, that's in the grave because they made one mistake, one night, one moment. So
how do we not glamorize, certain, like, is there a way for us to glamorize something else rather than, the, I guess, street life? Like, it seems like, I mean, it's not, I don't know if it's like said, like, out loud, but it's almost like it's just always like that's the cool thing rather than like, this other thing is like this is also cool, like doing it, doing it the legal way, I guess. Like, why is it?
Well, I mean, that education was taken out of the educational system a long time ago.
Yeah.
And for our people who look like you and I, we have to fight against a system that is 400 or 500 years ahead of us, that has been in place to try to stigmatize certain behaviors and glamorize certain other behaviors to support their system. And so if we want to create our own system that does not do that, actually does it in the reverse, then you have to put that much time and talent and attention into reversing that idea. And realizing that the system that's set up in place, that's in place right for you nowadays, is not meant for you. It's not meant for your success. Now, we have suffered through, as a people, some of the greatest things, some of the greatest systems that was not meant for us. And to come out the other end and still be an element on this planet, it's still something to be said about that. But for us still to be subjected to those subliminal seductions, at the very least, to those really structured, systematic things that lead us down those roads or glamorize going down those roads, is really ignorant, And it's something to be said about being subjected to that still in this earth time, 2021, with all these things out here that could be utilized for your growth and development. You still choose that. And it's definitely a choice, and it's not something that a lot of people who are really independent of using their family, friends, their community to get a leg up, if you try to do it yourself, man, you're gonna be susceptible to a lot of those things that set up for your demise. Because you're gonna think, man, I got to get it how I live. I got to get it, you know, the best way I know how. Well, if you got with your man and y'all put a plan together and y'all work together the same way y'all will work together in the nut world,
Right.
man, if y'all just put y'all mind together,
Yeah.
it may be a slower grind,
Yeah.
but if you de-glamorize the secular part of it, the entertainment part of it,
Yeah.
you'll come up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good men out here that realize through financial education, you know, through real personal, individual mental health and wellness, man, you can accomplish anything you want.
Yeah.
But it's centered around certain principles, and those principles, those educations that you could have got, especially in and around finance, it was left out of the system for a reason.
Yeah.
And if you get the opportunity to really sit down and understand the financial system and economics, man, you'll come up just like if you was in them streets.
Yeah.
Especially if you get some good people around you and all y'all pulling in the same direction. Easy.
Yeah.
Because the system is set up, the other part of the system is set up that way.
I think we might have to move inside. It's been picking up everything that you've been saying, but I'm like kind of concerned that the lawnmower might like be in the in the background a little bit.
That's up to you.
Okay. Yeah, we can just. I think we was talking about pretty much like the challenges when it comes to idolizing the like certain lifestyles, I guess, and like people making the decision to like go into that like knowing that it might not necessarily be the best decision. But I think what I was also thinking about was I guess like sometimes we make temporary, or like we make decisions that like we think of like the short term rather than like the long term like impact of those decisions sometimes. So like I guess like if you commit a crime or something like that, you're not necessarily thinking about like, if I get caught then I might have to do this amount of time, rather than we just thinking about like that like quick like the result of it, like, and just it just happening, I guess, is like was that I guess what you meant when you were saying like kind of like we should teach people about the consequences, I guess, of certain stuff.
Well, I mean, in this era time nowadays, we so far behind the 8 ball with education that a lot of what's going on is a result of not having options.
Yeah.
I remember during my time incarcerated where programs and services was what institutions were about. So you came in and you can be a part of a lot of different programs, and your incarceration time was built on understanding yourself and getting a lot of trades and shops and working and the type of stuff and just doing your time. And they went from programs and services to custody and control. So a lot of those programs like college and shops and all this stuff went out the door. So all you did was your time and had recreation, and they would limit that because a lot of the programs in and around the recreation department was geared on educating men on how to sportsmanship and camaraderie and organization and all that type of stuff. So your options were limited in how you behaved.
Yeah.
And so prison is a microcosm of society, the greatest society. So you can just imagine how, if that was happening in the institution, what was happening out here. Because the funds that support prisons is the same funds that support programs out here in the hood. Yeah. And so you would hear stories about, man, they didn't close all the rec centers. Yeah. They didn't, made it more difficult for you to go to the library. And, and when you juxtapose that with, or you add to that, parents not being there. You get raised by your grandparents, and gangs coming up, and a lot of them didn't start with a bad intent. A lot of them started with just trying to protect their own community. Yeah. And it morphed into other things. Right. And so nowadays you see a lot of guys who suffer from those decisions having limited decisions,
Yeah.
having limited things to put themselves in, and not having the time to really research, really apply themselves to the slow grind, when the immediate grind or the street grind is right there.
Yeah.
And then so many of your peers are involved. So
Man.
you don't want to vilify a lot of the people who find themselves making those decisions going down that road. But it's just about coming up with tailor-made strategies for the individuals and hoping that you can get them to change their mind and just slow up for a moment, digest this information, apply it practically, and then reap the reward.
Yeah.
Because there's a reward at the end,
But how do you instill that, like the slow grind though? Like that's something, difficult as well, just like knowing, or not knowing, but there's the possibility that you can get it a lot quicker doing it this way rather than slow grinding it out and like studying or like learning, doing something I guess a little bit more mentally challenging, I guess, in some sense. Like
it's about redefining what success is.
Yeah.
Success, if you feel like having a couple of $1,000 cash money is success, then let me show you some people that don't have cash money. They got credit card money, or, economics and finance down pat, where they, don't walk around with no cash. And let's see what they got, juxtapose what you want to get, what they got. If all you do is want to apply yourself at your same age, come out of your same type of environment, but they had opportunity to apply themselves to the slow grind, and see where you at.
Yeah.
If you want to put your couple of $1,000 up against, what they got success wise, family, etc., then we can have that conversation. But if you want to be, put yourself in an entertainer's shoes and try to live that life without having to understand what it means to really glean from that environment and how to use it for what it is, then that's a decision you got to make. One thing you have to be able to put in front of people nowadays is true information.
Yeah.
The true resources, the true way to practically apply what this information, this education will give you.
Right.
A lot of people don't have the time or the talent to be able to do that. And nowadays, because so many of our people have very short attention spans for that level of education, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's one of the hardest things that people in that line of life that's helping children, helping our youth, educate themselves and stir away from those lanes in the street that lead down to death and destruction.
Yeah. Because
it's difficult.
Right.
It is a very difficult thing because you up against a machine that, been at it for hundreds of years. Trying to put forth principles and practices that will keep you at a lower class of the society.
And like you just said, though, that's crazy. Even the thought that like now it could even be more challenging because we have so much instant gratification when it comes to just like social media. And you got like Amazon, stuff like that, so you're getting stuff immediately. So it's like even that that patience, I guess, that's like a challenge now for our youth as well.
Yeah, and then it begs your moral compass.
My bad, I gotta adjust this one. Okay, yeah, that's good.
I mean,
okay, my bad.
Like I said, it begs your moral compass, your moral education, your religious, so to speak, your spirituality. So you get a little bit of that added to your practical application of just societal or social principles. Then it's certain things you just ain't gonna do. You ain't got to know all the rules and regulations of society. When you have that moral compass, it's just certain things you just not gonna do. And I done seen documentaries on men who have been characterized as the least of us in society, and when they asked to do certain things that path laid them down to, then they drew the line. Like, I'm not doing something to no woman. I'm not doing something to no children. I'm not doing something that people innocent, characterized as being innocent, ain't got nothing to do with. But it's some people who will, based on what they hear entertainers say. And so you have to be able to split that sea, so to speak. You got to be able to give true information,
Yeah.
and be able to get it from a reliable source, a credible source, and so it's a difficult thing because the resources are just being made available for stuff like that because they see what society has been leading to. I mean, the last 20 years, the social structures and the moral structures of a society have been eroding. And if you ever want to hope to get it back to a level where you can start seeing that crime and things in society that people that really don't want to be a part of, don't want to see in and around their communities go down, then you're going to have to tie that in.
Yeah. And when you said entertainers, they putting out that not having morals, like committing crimes that somebody else wouldn't do. What would you mean by that? You mean like the rappers, I guess? Like,
I mean, just entertainment period, not just rappers. I mean, because rappers, a lot of them guys is talking about lives they live.
Right.
And when you talk to them about, well, what does it look like on the other end for you? Some of them got real big hopes about, man, wish I ain't never had to do nothing like that.
Yeah.
Wish I never heard of it, never seen it. But it's a fact. And some people glamorize some of the things that are so low, so demoralizing, so non connected to what their ancestors would want for them.
Yeah.
But it's what gets them paid.
Yeah.
And it's a part of the entertainment cycle, even in the movies. So it's not just our people who glamorize these characteristics and behaviors. It's other people, whether it be other nationalities of people. They glamorize that to a point where, people make their social behaviors and patterns behind it. And so for us to see that we got a whole bunch of information that would tell us that these type of things were set up for us to digest without even chewing it, swallow it wholeheartedly, and act on it.
Yeah.
And you see where it got us.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you don't want that for yourself, then you got to do something different. You got to be able to think. And a lot of us have been taught what to think and not how to think.
Man. Yeah. All right. This is like that was being taught what to think and not how to think. Like that's a big thing. Like just like how do you? And I keep saying how, asking, but like, what do you think as far as like, putting that, making it more important for people to be able to think on their own? Like how do you even?
You have to be taught how to think.
You
have to be taught how to think.
Yeah.
I mean, most people don't even know. You can ask 20 people about what is the definition of thought, and you'll get 20 different answers.
Yeah.
And we have a language that has a core definition to every word in it. Now, context can change it. They may have graduating definitions based on the era of time that you're in that have been added to the definition, the core definition, but they have a root or a core definition. And we such a talented people that we can take the worst out of things and turn them to our benefit. So why would we take the worst of things, the worst thoughts, and use them to try to aid us? Why would we gonna take the best thoughts? So when you're being taught how to think, you get taught how thought is developed. What strengths that you must need or use to actually be able to think. See, thought is developed by the exercise of strength.
Right.
And so when we define things like the word thought, it's the use of the divine gifts of judgment, conception, and inference. And so when you have a practical understanding of these things, then you can apply them in your everyday life.
Yeah.
So when you say, hold up, let me sit back and think what I'm actually doing.
Right.
I'm judging, I'm conceiving, and I'm inferring on the information that's present.
Man.
And then if I want to develop that thought, I develop it by the strengths that I have. See, God places in us a lot of strengths. And our job is to draw out of ourselves and have people draw out of us, draw out of us what's in us, and transform that educing into talents for service.
Yeah.
And so when you're able to do that and you ever have a working and a practical understanding of that, then your day-to-day activities will always be doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And you may bridge that, you may step, wrongly, you may make a mistake, but you ain't make an error.
Mm-hmm.
See, an error is a deliberate departure from that which is right.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to make no errors. You may make a
Right.
mistake.
Yeah.
And that comes with educating again. You may have a wrong mathematical equation where you got to solve for X, and you
Mm-hmm.
may do the process wrong. You may make a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but
Right.
you don't make an error. Once you know, people envy my dear Aunt Sally as a mathematical equation to solving the mathematical problems of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You don't put multiplying behind
Right. Yeah.
exponents
Yeah.
or subtraction because
Mhm.
that's not the formula.
Mm-hmm.
But when you know the formula, you may only make a mistake, but you don't want to make an error.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
Right.
what our people have to be taught.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we got to do. That's how we develop thought.
Yeah.
And when you learn how
Yeah.
to think, then can't nobody take that from you. 'Cause
Mm-hmm.
thought is the cause of it all.
Yeah. Now, is that from like how'd you even develop that like
Oh, I've been taught that.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate. So when I first got incarcerated, again, it was programs and services. And I was fortunate that I was around enough men who did not allow young men to come into their environment and to just do anything they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was around enough men who did not have ulterior motives for having young men around them.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the benefit of being around organizations like the Moorish Science Temple of America,
Yeah.
the
Wow.
Nation of Islam,
Mm-hmm.
AME, men who was in the church who had no ulterior motives for helping the development of young men.
Yeah.
And so I took full advantage of it. And not that I really even had a choice, but it was a part of my DNA coming in, and I took advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately for me, me and my peers,
Mm-hmm.
and the peers who I still in contact with to this day, we had a real good opportunity to glean from what was left in the institutions, manhood.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did,
Yeah.
and it benefited us. And a lot of
Wow.
those programs and a lot of those men who was at the embryonic stage of my growth and development as a man are gone.
Mm-hmm.
And they passed that opportunity on for men like myself, and I did my part.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it's time for me to move on, you try to leave those same tools behind,
Right.
but the system don't support it.
Yeah.
So they would try to erode those characteristics and ideas that was
Jeez.
left in the system, that men that left before me, the characteristics I left. So they try to erode that for the men who they now, and try to help these young brothers mature
Mm-hmm.
and educate themselves while they sojourn in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
And so I see what the problem is out here. And it's just a little bit more dangerous out here because a lot of these young brothers got real tears in their eyes, real
Mhm.
hurt in their heart from the things that they seen. They suffer from real trauma
Mm-hmm.
that's associated out here in those wrong lanes in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for you to really affect that change that is needed, my education teaches me you may have to induce another form of trauma
Mm-hmm.
to get them out of that trauma that they are suffering from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so in order to be able to do that, you're going to need some real resources.
Yeah.
You can't just say, man, I'm going to help you get out your situation when the hurt and love that they have in their heart is connected to their family.
Mm-hmm.
In a weird sense, they do it and show it and display it in a weird way
Yeah.
based on how society perceive it. But they still connected to their friends. They not doing nothing without their friends. They not doing nothing without the approval of their peer group.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to induce some sort of trauma that will get them to realize
Mm-hmm.
that if you get right, then all them gonna be right.
Yeah.
Because you ain't got to separate yourself from them to the point where if they need you to help to show them the way that you're not going to be able to. We're going to teach you how to go back and get them and carry them with you.
Mm-hmm. Now, what would that trauma look like, though? Like, what is what?
It's a development. It's not something that you can broad brush.
Right.
It's going to be something that you're going to have to tailor make for the individual. Some young brothers need, because they don't have nothing,
Mm-hmm.
just a change of scenery.
Yeah.
And it's so much of a change of scenery that they may have to come all the way out of city environment to a country.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? They may have to even go to a foreign land to get some type of education, some type of educing out of them, so that they can start propelling themselves. Raising their intellect, the knowledge that they get, because knowledge is like a fire. It must first be kindled by some external agent. Then afterwards,
Right.
it will seek to propagate itself.
Yeah.
So that's the objective, is to draw out of them enough fire that once it's really kindled, once it's nurtured, then it will seek to propagate itself.
Right.
And so when you teach them that before they even start going through the regiments, they start going through the trauma that will induce them to really get back on point, you got to put it in such a way that it's palatable for them. They can digest it. They can really see and envision it. And when you're able to do that, then you can start affect some change. But it comes with having the resources, economics.
Yeah.
It comes with having those resources. Because like I say, for instance, if we was to come get, 2 or 3 young brothers out the hood, their mindset is going to be so still attached to the hood.
Yeah.
That if you're not able to bring a semblance of that at the very least, you're going to lose them.
Yeah.
Because the structure of that foreign place, that trauma that they're going to have to get introduced to shock them back into a sense of, you don't have to be down that road. It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough. So, you have to develop a tailor-made resource for these young men and women to put themselves in that mindset.
And so when you said, so you take them into a different environment, and you said you have to simulate the environment that they are coming from, like,
no,
so
you may have to have a semblance of what they left. So
Right.
you don't want it, you may not be able to take them cold turkey from that environment.
I got you.
So you may say, for instance, you taking them out of that environment to a place where nothing about that environment exists.
Yeah. Right.
But yet, time to time, you give them
a little bit of it.
A little bit of it.
They going it.
But they looking at it from a different perspective
now. Yeah.
So they realize that, boy, I really could have done without that.
Right.
Yeah, I remember we used to do that, but y'all, like, for real, that job was stupid.
It's a different way now.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so when you're able to give them that opportunity to look at it from a different perspective, it's like looking at a mountain from this perspective and saying, let me take you around the other side. You look, what the hell? I didn't see that from this side. Yeah, because you wasn't there. So let me take you around so you can see it from this perspective.
Yeah.
Because the success is just like that. Looking at a mountain, like, damn, if all I can see is from this perspective, how I can be able to climb this mountain, and I don't see no road that was trailblazed. I don't see no steps or no ladders or nothing that can get me up this mountain. So I might as well just stay right where I'm at. But if I can take you to the other side and say, if I give you this information, now what do you see?
Yeah.
I do see a pathway up there.
Right.
I do see. So, man, why wouldn't I go up there? Why wouldn't I do that?
Right.
So, and it's again, it's about having the resources to do that.
So that, like, that whole, like, philosophy and, like, developing that, would I guess, like, did you have some sort of schedule or, like, regimen that was, like, that the people, like, I know you mentioned that you had some, like, teachers, did they, like, feed you, like, certain books and they would be like, read this today and then, read this the next day? Like, was it some type of, like, sort of routine that you had, or, like, some type of structure that you had built in order to, like, develop yourself? Like, yeah.
It was just like that. I mean, you had patterns that had been set. I mean, you got to actually observe their behaviors. And it was just certain things they just didn't do. And a lot of things they wouldn't do just in the eyesight of the public. And so you would see them reading certain books, and they would give you books that was required reading. And so you would have to immerse yourself in that, because there was an expectation of being quote unquote stamped in that environment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you was a part of a certain organization and that organization was nothing but positive, you found yourself immersed in that.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself connected to other organizations that was nothing but positive. That don't mean they was perfect. That don't mean that you would see the good men that led those organizations stumble and fall. It didn't mean that. It mean that they was giving you principles that you can take and save the whole world with, but you had to take them and save yourself.
Yeah.
So don't get caught up in following no man, to your salvation or to your success. Follow the principles. And once you apply them to yourself, then there's nothing that you can't do. You apply yourself to yourself.
Right.
And then,
so what one of those, I guess, like studies, like what would that look like? I guess, like, was that like how much would you read, like, or like how, like in one day, I guess, and like what?
It was times where when you really got the study habit down, you might find yourself reading and studying for 6 hours, 8 hours straight, without eating, without drinking, because you was so immersed in the information. And there may be a timeline associated with digesting this information, because we got study class in 3 days, or we going to like another brother's service, and we got what they used to call functions set up, and you may have to speak. And so your time on the podium to speak to a multitude of people may be an hour.
Yeah, man.
So your opening may be 15, 20 minutes. So your subject and where you had to conduct yourself, you had to study, man.
Yeah.
And then you would, again, I was fortunate enough to be around men who was my peers, that we sharpened each other. And so a lot of my peers, man, we put a lot of work in, man. So again, the environment was conducive for that. And I stayed around in that environment long enough to develop some core principles.
How do you? My bad. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was something that it was transferable out here to society.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna try to ask. How do we like simulate that or recreate something like that? Like, what? I don't feel like, maybe it's just me. Like, I haven't had that like group of people, like organization, I guess, where I could like have that same experience. But like is it of course it's possible, but like I don't know if it's out there. But is there a way for us to create that same structure for young men?
Well, again, it's about the resources, because what we had to do, and we was able to apply that information, was because we had time.
Yeah, right.
I didn't have to worry about cleaning up a whole house. I had a cell.
Yep.
I didn't have to worry about who was going to cook my meals. We had a kitchen. I didn't have to worry about paying the light bill or water bill, none of that stuff, because I was incarcerated. And so the cares and solicitudes in life, I didn't have to worry about, because I was incarcerated.
Yeah.
Out here, you have to worry about those things. Now, if I can take you from that worry and say, don't have to worry about that.
Right.
All I need you to do is apply yourself to yourself.
And everything
Get
else
this information. We're going to deal with those things, because we got to teach you how to make sure that you generate enough finance. And finance is a science of money management. It's not about generating money. It's about generating finance. And so we're going to teach you how to deal with that. But you got to apply yourself to yourself. And so once you get those things down, those core principles down, and you apply love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, everything you do, then your success is always going to be the end, the end result. But after difficulty comes ease, as the scripture says.
Yeah.
So once you apply those principles like that, you know what the result of hard work is. You know what blood, sweat, and tears are. And you just seen them not only in the men that came before you, you seen them right beside you with your peers. You seen the hard work they putting in.
Yeah.
You seen what the lapses that you make in your studies, where you're supposed to have that answer, but your best friend got the answer because he applied himself to himself.
Yeah. You said pain, love, and
truth, peace, freedom, and justice. That's the 5 highest principles known to man.
Yeah.
That's taught in the Moral Science Temple of America. So when you apply those principles, success is the end result. And what you have to learn how to do is make them practical.
Right. And you had also mentioned like pain and like, so I was listening to, I don't know if you heard of him, but David Goggins, he's like one of those like ultra marathon, like extreme like runners and stuff like that. But he always talks about, no pain, no progress, pretty much. Like you gotta like struggle a little bit in order to like, so like after that struggle, like, so, or you have to struggle in order to grow, pretty much. Like there has to be some sort of like, pain in the sense of even like, down to if I'm reading, and my head might hurt because I'm reading so much, or I'm like, my my ego. I don't know if it's the ego or like the id, but like pretty much it's telling you to stop reading. Like, let's just chill. Like let me do something that's more pleasing to me rather than like that like challenging thing that I'm not necessarily used to doing. Like that's pain as well, but it's pretty much like you got to get past that part in order to like then feel that that gratification like afterwards.
After
much.
Difficulty comes ease. It's a divine principle.
Yeah.
So the scripture talks about that.
Comes ease.
And it talks about patiently persevere.
Mm-hmm.
So when you understand and you really study these principles, the pathway to success, it's a narrow path, but it becomes a path that you can go down because you develop a way to balance yourself on that narrow path.
Yeah.
And so without those principles, you see it and you say, I know I can't do that. It's too narrow.
Yeah.
Well, the only reason you can't go is because you don't have what you need to balance yourself down that path.
Mm-hmm.
And once you learn how to carry those things that will balance you down that path, then not only will you be able to go down that path, you will be able to go down that path with some efficiency and some speed.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of young men who came up
true.
with me when we came out of prison, we was able to effectuate our transition with a certain amount of efficiency and speed that other young men don't find because we applied ourselves to ourselves. We was fortunate to be around men who didn't allow us to do anything other than that.
Yeah.
And so when we came out here, it wasn't a great transition that a lot of young brothers who just come home from prison have. I was fortunate. I had a strong support system.
Yeah.
Still have it to this day. And a lot of the men who I come up around, strong support systems. But it didn't come from them being knuckleheads and burning bridges while they was in, doing all types of crazy stuff. Man, we was in an environment where we got the opportunity to apply ourselves to ourselves.
Yeah.
So it was just certain things we just didn't do. Or at the very least, they get caught doing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
right.
I tell a lot of brothers who have conversations like this with, and a lot of the men who I come up with, we didn't all have bad days in there. It's some things that we can't even talk about. We had fun, things we did in there. So
yeah.
So it wasn't always a bad day. But it was all based in and around our ability to think. And manage ourselves in an environment that we didn't call home. That we didn't say that I'm gonna spend the rest of my life in here, and so I got to make this an environment that's something I'm gonna do. Now our objective was to get home.
Now what's your are you religious or like what do you identify as, I guess, if that's the way to ask, like what's your religion?
Well, I practice Islam.
Yeah. Okay.
And so when you ask that question, a lot of people don't know what that means. And so it's get asked and answered in different ways. So so just to answer your question, yeah, I practice Islam.
And I want to talk about that too, but also I just wanted to ask, do you like meditate anything like that as well?
Oh, you got to. You learn that through your practice. It's one of those things that you can do while you in casual conversation. Meditate. I meditate on the vibrations that you put out. The energy, the words, because there's a spirit in words. And so it doesn't mean that you go sit in the corner and calm yourself and still yourself. That is the core principle,
right?
The core idea that you find yourself a spot and sit and meditate.
But it's not just
but once you become efficient and proficient in that idea, you can meditate in an instant. And you can calm yourself and still yourself to be able to receive all that being able to meditate has for
man. Yeah. That's tough, man. That's that's some great information, man. It's like it's so much that I wanted to get into, but that man, that's like a lot to even like I wasn't even thinking that we was gonna get to this. That's tough. But I guess like so you were talking about like it was easy to sort of transition, like getting out of
less difficult.
Yeah.
I'm a little different because of my support system. um, you will get a lot closer to less difficult. I mean, you'll get a lot closer to easy than less difficult for me because of my support system, which I don't take for granted and still have to this day, still transitioning to this day. But I was afforded a lot greater opportunity because of my support system that a lot of young brothers can never imagine. And so, and a lot of my friends who was in that environment with me, great support systems, man. So our likeness and our path, you wouldn't necessarily put up in front of a lot of young brothers as a path to follow, because is extraordinary. But there is some core things that we still had to deal with in transitioning, because it's just a factor of coming from that environment, coming back into society. It's just a fact. You're gonna have to deal with some of those things.
Right. Yeah.
But when you have certain tools, you have certain support.
Right.
It makes it easier.
Yeah.
You know. And so with a lot of my friends and a lot of brothers who come up with us, what we do is try to create an environment where the guys who we know may just had a casual association with, when they come home, they got us as a resource. So.
And also, so as far as that transition, how much of, I guess, the routine did you keep, I guess, like from being in prison versus like now, like I guess were there certain habits and stuff like that you kept, like going on from then, or like I guess, like how was that transition?
A lot of them you have to leave right where you left. Yeah. Where you got them from. It's about being able to peel off a lot of the stigmas that people characterize you as having out here. Yeah. It's a delicate balance, because you may find yourself peeling off some things in your transition coming home, that you have to come home and find a way to reformulate those things, because they're a part of your survival out here. Yeah. So it's a delicate undertaking. A lot of the things that I did on a daily basis while I was incarcerated, I don't have to do no more. Yeah. But there is a maintenance that I allow myself to go through to make sure that I'm in the right mindset, I'm doing having the right behaviors on display. Because you can be characterized out here as being institutionalized, and it's very easy, because a lot of the things you go through while there, you just got to do because you got to survive. Yeah. And that's definitely an environment where survival is an idea. And so when you come out here, survival is an idea. And you may have to still use the same survival tactics that you had while you was incarcerated out here in the street. It may be just a degree or two different, but you still might have to deal with people in a certain way, the same way you dealt with them while I was incarcerated. And it's just a fact. Some people try to gloss over that because they got a double agenda or another motive. Right. But if you're honest with yourself, a lot of what happens in prison is a microcosm of what's happening out here. And the way you deal with certain people, how you deal with authority figures and your peers in prison, some of those things are transferable out here. Yeah. Yep. One thing that's not transferable from incarcerating to being out in society is that when you're incarcerated, a lot of the things you deal with, you got to deal with them right then, right now. Yeah. Out here, man, I can leave you right where you at. I'm gone. You can deal with that yourself. I'm going over here. Yeah. Not over here. I'm going to a whole nother part of town. So I ain't got to deal with it right here, right now, and worry about the characterization or the stigmatization of you not dealing with the issue right then and right now. Yeah. That's how you feel, Chad? I'm gone. Yeah. Right. And you start to see those things coming as you get sharper with that. If that tool where you had to deal with it while you was incarcerated, well, same way you had to deal with it out here. You just see certain characteristics and behaviors coming, so you know how to get out the way of them or learn how to deal with them as they come. If you find yourself in that lane. Yeah.
Now, I guess, and I don't know if this is like just not necessarily a stereotype, but like, of course, like things can be different, but just as far as like the, I guess, aggression in a sense, like, did you feel like you had to be like a more aggressive, I guess, being in prison, like, or just, I guess, like, maybe it's just more aware, like, of your surroundings, maybe, like, being in prison, but then versus, like, being, like, like now.
Well, no, I mean, being incarcerated, you didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You didn't have to show a sign of aggression.
Yeah, okay.
You didn't have to, be someone who had to wear, their emotions on their sleeves or be characterized as going hard and other stuff like that. You don't have to do that. It's a lane in there, just like out here in society, where you could just mind your business, and do your thing. Whole bunch of lanes in there for that.
Okay.
They are narrow.
Yeah.
They are roads less traveled. But there are lanes in there for you can, get up every morning, do your little regimen, get your little coffee, get on the phone, go to the library, go to the gym, and you don't have to get caught up in none of that junk. Now, you still may be susceptible to somebody being a knucklehead on the T or in the unit and be punished for it, be collateral damage for it, and you just have to deal with it how you deal with it. But you don't have to be the one. You don't have to be associated with those who are the ones. There's a lane for that, So everybody in there ain't bad and everybody in there ain't good.
Yeah.
So in the same way out here, people saying, what's going on in the streets and, things happening. I mean, it's people out here that'll see those things happening firsthand. Like they was right on the corner when such and such happened, or they was right in the store when such and such happened. And then some people that, go out here every day and don't see none of that. Only way they know it happened if they see it on the news or hear it on the radio. Yeah. Because they not in that environment where those things take place every day, or things are subject to happen like that every day. So it's like I said, there's lanes out here, and there's plenty of them that I've seen for a man to be out here or a woman to be out here being successful, minding their business, not caught up in the things that people characterize as being in the bad or in the wrong lanes. So you find yourself where you solve your problems best.
I don't know if I feel like somebody might have said it, or you may have mentioned it, but you don't like drink or smoke.
No, I don't.
Is that because of like a religious practice, or is that like
I just never did. I mean, when I came up, I never really indulged in that behavior because I really felt like, me personally, people was doing it to get where I was at. So the only thing I really focused on was being in an environment where it was live females. So you mean environment, I'm in my element. Yeah. And so you got some men who would be around females and still feel like they had to drink.
To get a little comfortable.
Me?
Yeah, already there.
I'm already there. You know what I'm saying? Around my good men. And we round some honey.
That's all that's needed.
Man, that's it. And I never, and again, that was a part of it. I happened to be in a family where there were some people in my family who had went down that road, and I got to see, what it was like firsthand. And so that was an education. And so I knew, for me, I never had an appetite for it. I never really had to was socialized to believe that was something that was hip and cool to the point where I felt like I needed to indulge, and so I just didn't. Yeah. And so I built up a principle in my mind that, a reason why a lot of people did that is because they, had to build up the courage or the facade in their mind to really enjoy this environment. I got to be tipsy. I got to, I got to be a little high to put on display characteristics that somebody say, "Oh, he crazy." Yeah. You really wanted to display that anyway. You just needed a little sip, a little smoke to, put that on display. Yeah. And to each his own. I just never had to put my mind in that mindset to, do it. And that's just, my story. Yeah.
Because I was asking about that because I would do it, I guess like socially, but I try to like, I don't like the impact that it has, like the after effect, or like, or just like I feel like for me personally, some of it impacts like I feel like my sharpness almost. But I wanted to ask you, like, do you do anything in particular that, like, to stay focused or to stay sharp, like, on things? Like, is it, I guess, like maybe exercise or like health wise? Is there anything that you
you stay up
You
on your
do.
maintenance on your workouts because I done so much working out being incarcerated that you don't do it nowadays to build. So now it's just to maintain as much as you can.
Yeah.
And so, but as far as cognitively, you just want to stay sharp on your core principles. It's just certain things that you learn that it checks your behavior. And when you do go outside of those lines, you're doing it from a position of thought, not peer pressure, not inebriation or none of that. It's because I chose to.
Yeah.
And I know what those consequences are, and I'm willing to accept them as they come. So I would, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. It ain't going to be because I was drunk or I was high or nothing like that. It's going to be because I decided to.
Yeah.
And I know what the consequences of my actions are. And I'm willing to accept them. And so juxtaposing that with people who use alcohol and drugs to get to a certain mindset and chill out and cool. Man, I ain't vilifying nobody for doing that, man. I enjoy the company of people who do. But for me, I just never went down that road, and for me to stay sharp is the only thing I know in that regard. I don't have a propensity to do anything as a foreign substance, drinking or alcohol or drugs that will aid in that regard. So I only know it to be something that would make those things deficient.
Right.
So why would I, not having a propensity to, not having a social history to, why would I indulge in that when, I don't even like cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even put myself in that mindset.
Yeah.
Because in order for me to stay who I am, I just got to do what makes me me.
Right. Yeah. And I know this is like a typical question, but and I don't know like how much you want to go into it, but I wanted to ask like that transition from 30 years like coming home, how was it like overwhelming? Like coming home and like a lot of stuff has changed, like just I guess like just seeing certain stuff, just like
man, I was fortunate because not only did I spend a lot of time in and been around good men and developing friendships, real friendships with guys who I'm out here in the streets with today. I was fortunate to stay in contact with men who was going home. And so I lived vicariously through them because I was educated enough to be able to do that. To be able to live my life and my ideas and the things I wanted to do when I transitioned home through the lives of guys who was going home. So I stayed in contact with them. I would call them, they would write me, they would send me pictures, and I was fortunate to be able to take that information and process it in a way that made my transition start 20 years before I came home. So I was ready to come home after I had 10 years in. So the same person I am today ain't far off from my ability to think, my ability to process information, my ability to execute the information that I have that I had 20 years before I came home. So those core principles, that behavior, the tools that I had are the same tools I got to this day. They are a different caliber of tools. They are sharpened at a different degree. But I still had those tools 20 years before I got here. And so having that as a mindset, my transition started 20 years before I got out into society. So it was a lot easier for me. I knew about finance. I knew about the social structures. I knew about how my family was going to react and prepared my mindset and my behavior to deal with that. And so it made it a lot easier for me in my transition. A lot of men can't say that. And I was forced in that regard. I didn't come out here with a set regimen and plan that I got to do X, Y, and Z in order for me to be successful. I made myself my tool belt with a lot of different tools. I made my agility a lot more agile to be able to go down in different directions to be successful. So if I was to come home and say, man, I had to be a barber because I'm a licensed barber. but I don't have to be in no barber shop.
Mm-hmm.
Do I got my license? Yeah. And I
Yeah.
made it such an easy path when I come home, transition, go with my barber's license, so I can fall back on that at any time.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't even work as a barber every day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So the path that I found to be successful for me came in the form of working for a program like this program I work for, YAP.
Mm-hmm.
You know, help me be able to realize a few more goals and aspirations I have by working with returning adult citizens
Mm-hmm.
in a youth program.
Yeah.
First started out working with youth during the pandemic on Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
helping them understand and transition from the things they was going through,
Mm-hmm. Right.
being a part of that.
Right.
You know, something I did while I was incarcerated. And so being agile enough, having enough tools,
Mm-hmm.
certifications, and education to be able to come home and put myself in that lane.
Yeah.
When I'm a licensed barber, I could have came home and said, man, if I can't be no barber, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Right.
You know, was fortunate enough to come home, be able to get my license and have my own shop.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not something I'm going to be sitting around doing. I'm not sitting around in nobody barber shop, even if it's my own, cutting no hair every day.
Yeah.
Because I miss so much out on life and being able to experience. One thing I'm going to do every day is be able to get up and do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Go left or go right, get in my truck and go here and go there.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do that as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so jobs like this provide me with an opportunity to
Yeah.
be able to create my schedule, be able to create the time that I'm going to do my schedule, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate in that regard that I had the education and the certification to be able to come home and get a position like this.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it came with being able to have the people skills enough to deal with people who was employed by this program and in and around this program, and having such an impression on them that they said, well, we're going to champion your cause.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to speak highly of you. We're going to put you in position to say, when an employment spot come open, we're going to advocate for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened for me.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Man. And so, is that something from, like, I see the Maryland flag, so is that's a Maryland thing? Or?
Maryland and DC. As a matter of fact, the initiative that we have, that I'm working with, is primarily a DC program.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's called community-based mentorship services. And it deal with returning adult citizens, guys who's coming home from prison.
Okay.
And we give them wraparound services primarily around trauma-informed care and social capital. So we give them 2 modules, and we support them with things, of course, you know, getting their IDs and social security cards and jobs and all that stuff, but also dealing with trauma that they had adverse childhood experiences when they was young, and the trauma they suffered while they was incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
And so we give them an opportunity to go through modules that will give them greater insight on themselves and how to deal with their transition coming home.
Yeah.
You know, so
Man.
a lot of that stuff, man, is second nature to me, because all I ever did was help people. You know what I'm saying? All I ever did was find myself in leadership positions.
Yeah.
You know, so to whom much is gifted, much is required.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been nothing for me to sit around in some barbershop and just cut hair. But what is in my DNA, what I have been gifted with, is the ability to find ways to help people
Mm-hmm.
and lead people. So that's always been a part of what I do. So for me not to transform that gift into a talent for service will be going against my God nature.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate again that I was in an environment where that was drawn out of me and put on a plate for me to understand, learn from it, and transform it into a talent for service.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do to this day.
Man. So do you know of any, I guess, organizations for, like, I guess, like, you know, the youth, just like young guys just in the city, not necessarily, you know, like in any type of trouble or anything like that, but just like,
it's a lot of programs out there.
I don't know if they get like as much, you know, publicity, I guess.
It's so hard to get to because the way the resources are allocated nowadays. You remember once upon a time there was youth centers and recreation centers in every neighborhood. And because of the generations that were left without those programs, there's a lot less more informed people on how to deal with children who may not be cookie cutter. They may have a parent missing in the home, or both parents missing in the home, or be abused, or maybe have both parents in the home but be neglected. You know, not so much neglected where they not eating or what have you, but they not being paid enough attention to.
Right. Yeah.
So you might get all these different personalities in a community-based program where we trying to get them to play on the basketball team. But if you don't know how to deal with all those individual personalities, how are you going to create a team environment?
Yeah.
You just worried about the team, and then success in that team may be the primary objective, when really the success is getting these young people up to adulthood without having trauma affect their life in a way that they start doing things that is abnormal to function in society and find themselves incarcerated, or at the worst find themselves dead. So you got to have the tools that it takes to deal with that. And there's so few of us that have these tools. There's so few programs that actually make it practical for you to be able to use these tools, because they don't give you enough finance to be able to say, now I'm working for this job, I ain't got to worry about nothing because my bills are gonna be paid. But now you got jobs like, you know, people get jobs where they still have to create another source of income,
Right.
to be able to make their life sustainable.
Yeah.
And still working in the field where you worried about somebody else. I mean, people bring these issues home and working all hours of the night and don't have a resource to build their job for. I mean, you say, man, you got 40 hours to get this work done.
Yeah.
Well, I may be working this job for 60 hours because it's a part of my DNA. For me to be able to help somebody, I'm not going to let nobody call my phone and say help and I not help them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I was even thinking about that for like teachers, like if they were, you know, paid more, like to be so that they could like step in, you know, like if they, you know, being more involved, because like what you were talking about, there are instances where there's, you know, kids where their parents or like somebody might not be there, like, you know, those absences. So it's like there is a possibility that like a kid could get a structure like in school, but it's just like that's so much, you know, more to ask from a teacher outside of, you know, just like grading papers, you know, and like, you know, doing like all of those other things and like trying to correct them within the classroom, like. But I don't know, I guess like
they're not even getting paid for what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you just compensated them for what they do, what's in their DNA, what's in their job description, then it will be a lot easier for them to deal with the children outside of that, because it's in their DNA.
Yeah.
But they not even compensated for what they do or even asked to do as far as their job title.
Right.
You got a lady or a man who go to school and get a degree to be a teacher, and that asking of that degree doesn't mean 35 students and I'm one teacher. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, how could you even ask that of somebody?
Right.
You don't ask that of national football teams and college. They got assistants, you know, to help them educate and foster this level of education to the children. So if you're saying this for a student, for a teacher, to be able to go into an environment where you may not know none of these students and be able to effectuate their education or their literacy, let alone their education, because they're not even getting educated.
Right.
They're just being made literate. Just effectuate a literacy in these children and not have to take that home. You're not getting paid for that.
Yeah.
You're not getting compensated for that, because every teacher I ever ran across who made an impression on me did so outside of the classroom. I had, when I first got incarcerated, one of my teachers, my Spanish teacher, came to visit me.
Wow, man. Yeah. And you had said something as far as like, you know, education, but they like, you know, they're just is like literacy, not necessarily like just they're making them literate. There's a quote, I don't know who said it, but they pretty much talked about like, don't allow schooling get in the way of your education, because like a lot of times I think we spend so much time in school, but we're not learning, like, you know, like what we were just talking about, or like as far as like thinking, like thoughts and like how to like process these things, like how to, you know, like how to actually put, you know, this stuff into practice. Like
education is not really the job of the individual. There comes a time where your education is yours, but as a child, your education is not necessarily yours to experience. It's your family's. That's why it takes a village. And so that concept means education, the root word is educe.
Mm-hmm.
It means to draw out.
Mm-hmm.
So it is our responsibility to draw out of the child those qualities that God placed in them.
Yeah.
And put them on display for them to see them, to fall in love with them,
Mm-hmm.
and to transform them into talents for service.
Mm-hmm.
That's what our ancestors did. That's why they had such great success in their societies. They, the architects of not only ancient civilizations but modern civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not have old folks homes or orphanages or even prisons.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they were civilized societies.
Yeah.
How did they do that?
Mm-hmm.
Because they drew out of each and every child what God placed in them, turned them into service for the community through transforming their talent into service.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may come from a long line of well-to-do family members,
Mm-hmm.
but yet you still had a tailor-made education, because that's where God intended it, for you to draw out of you or be drawn out of you what He placed in you.
Mm-hmm.
And what we don't do for our children is we don't do that because we keep borrowing the culture, customs, and traditions of other people, other societies who didn't nurture that, didn't cultivate that
Right.
because of their environment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we have to do that for our children, but it only is going to happen when we have the resources to.
Right. Yeah.
You know, when we have the resources to, then you'll be able to effectuate education out of the child, and their literacy or their schooling won't get in the way, because it'll be the parent or the family's a cause to draw out the education.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, we're going to send them to school to be literate, be able to be a part of society. There's certain things you're going to have to go to school for, but schooling is just what it is. Schooling is being able to be made literate to be able to be a part of society.
Yeah.
But your education,
Yeah.
that's going to create an identity for not only yourself, but for your family.
Right.
And your great as your society.
Yeah. That's deep.
Yeah, it is.
And like when I was just talking to somebody about this, because I had noticed I must have been going into like the 9th grade, or like I might have been like 8th grade, but I was thinking about how I started to become sort of a little bit defiant when it came to like my classes, because like I had realized that we were learning so much about like Greek mythology, like Jewish culture, like just like a bunch of different like not necessarily black culture. Like we weren't really learning about like the history of like Africa, like other than slavery and stuff like that. So like what you were just talking about is just like that importance of just really like knowing like like for like the education for like us, you know what I mean, like being able to have something, and I think that was my challenge. Like I wanted something that I could like sort of like relate to, or just to build myself, to build like my identity. And it was like I don't know if I was like what you were talking about. I get like his school system is just like literacy. It wasn't necessarily like in place for that. Something else like more important for like your family or like your village to be able to like teach those things.
Right, and it's not by happenstance or osmosis that concept is not fostered. You don't see think tanks of our people sitting around trying to effectuate change or effectuate education for our children. It's different little groups set aside that doing far and more than they're being compensated for, because it's a part of their DNA. But yet they still need the resources to be able to make it practical for the child to follow them down that path. And this society does not put enough resources for our children to follow our leaders down that path. As a matter of fact, they put obstacles in that way for you to glean those resources, not obstacles that we cannot surmount. But in order for us to surmount them, we have to do one thing. We have to come together. We have to find that cultural continuity to look back into the cultural incubator of our creation and come up with those concepts and ideas and principles that will allow our children to be successful, even in a society that we did not create. We built, but we did not create.
Right.
So we got to do those things, and it's only going to come when we can pool our resources.
Mm-hmm.
We can understand how the financial system of this society works, the rules and regulations of it, and there's enough people around here that teach us that look like us, but it's not enough of us learning it.
Yeah. Right.
It's not enough of us taking that information and saying to their peers, man, let me tell you what I just found out.
Yeah.
Let me show you this book I just read, man. So let's try to do this. Man, you got $100 you get ready to spend on Hugo Boss.
Right.
You got $100 you get ready to spend on going to the club. Man, let me get that $100 and let me invest it for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And have the practical and education and knowledge to be able to explain it to your man.
Mm-hmm.
And he love you and trust you enough to do something like that instead of saying, I love you and trust you enough to go down in his hood and do X, Y, and Z. I love you and trust you enough to give you $100 and you invest it for me. And you saying that, man, listen, if we do this the right way, instead of us gambling in the streets, we gambling with this investment, this property, this real estate. And if we do it the right way, in 3 years, all of us will have $50,000.
Yeah. Man.
And an investment property that's a recurring and residual income attached to it, associated with it.
Jeez.
So that means your daughter, and by the time she's 12 years old, she will have enough residual income coming in that she ain't got to get no birthday present. She gonna have to work her own because you got a job.
Yeah.
I can write her presents off a part of my job because I done created a residual income that she's an employee in my company at 12 years old.
Man. Yeah.
And it's information out there, scholars that look like us that's teaching this, that's re-educating our people on how to work the financial and educational and economic system. But it's not enough of us learning it.
Yeah. Man, that's the truth. For real. So I try to, and I was gonna say, so this whole thing was like a whole lot of advice and like and just like a whole lot of like good information. But I wanted to, I don't know, like if you had anything specific that, because normally when I try to close, I try to close with some sort of advice, I guess, like like anything that comes to mind for you. As far as like somebody like a young kid like coming up in the city might not necessarily be in the best environment, or like like any type of advice for them, like just to maybe they want something good for themselves, but they might not necessarily see that all the time, like if you have anything, I guess.
Well, the core thing for me that changed my life was when I heard that if I can get you to think, you can save yourself. So when I got the chance to study that, if I can get you to think, you can save yourself. Now everybody wants to be saved. Now, even if you don't feel like you're in a position where you need to be saved, the concept of being saved is not just being in a bad situation going to a good situation. The concept of being saved is that I want to be more successful than I am right now.
Right.
If I can get you to think, you can save yourself.
Yeah, man, that's the truth. For real.
And so there's information out there that you can take and save a nation. But if you take it and save yourself, then that's the idea. That's the grand idea. But the only way you're gonna be able to do that is that you got to study yourself.
Right.
You got to study yourself, and when you finish studying yourself, go study yourself some more. Because everything that happens in the world, every characteristic, every personality, every character trait that you're going to see out here is in you. And if you know yourself, your higher self and your lower self, then when you come across people, you can already know how to deal with them. Because you see it in you. You didn't face them characteristics inside of you. You know what they look like. You know how to deal with them. Now, of course, it's going to be a different degree because God didn't make all of us the same. But you're going to know what those characteristics and those characters are capable of. And if you can get yourself to think, you'll know how to deal with those things. And you can save yourself. for me for being in a situation where you can't get out of, or a situation where you find yourself where you can help somebody. You know, because if I can get you to think, you can save yourself.
Yeah, man. Damn, that's great, man. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
That was great, man. That's probably the best one that I've done, man. I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you. I want a copy of this too.
But, oh yeah, I'm gonna definitely send you everything.